basically, oh, you got more coming in?
Good.
I
did start the live streaming.
Okay, that's fine.
We'll be starting in a few minutes for those tuning in at home.
Did you get it? I did. You did. Okay, perfect. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And I'm sure a lot of you came tonight because you thought Dan was speaking. My apologies, you got Dane instead. Just a staff pharmacist here. I shouldn't say just I'm proud to be a staff pharmacist here. Take a lot of roles on. Should I just start?
Whenever you're ready. Sir.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so thank you all for coming. I mean, taking time out of your day to come here and listen to me rant or go on, rabbit holes is really nice of you. But hopefully along the way, we learned a little bit about nitric oxide. I want to thank MD Custom RX Pharmacy for allowing us to do these seminars. I think that's wonderful. I don't know of any other pharmacies that hold these, to be honest. Dan kind of pioneered this whole thing. So I want to thank Dan for all the work he's done with YouTube. I mean, it's not, you actually got to put in work for that. You got to learn how to utilize YouTube, how to work it properly. So he's put a lot of extra effort in.
I don't have your wireless mic.
Oh, we should probably get mic'd up. Yeah.
I'll let you do that.
I was just under the
I'm
shirt.
not going to stick my arm down here.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow. Well, really after hours.
I know you well, but not that well.
And it's on. I see blue lights.
It is on, yeah.
Okay, let me set this down. You think it's appropriate to have it facing away?
I would.
Is that okay? Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Okay. As long, well, we'll find out if you can hear me. I'll listen to this later tonight. Okay, so again, just thank you all for coming. Thank you, MD Custom RX, for holding this. Thank you, Dan, for taking the time to do all the work you've done for YouTube to let viewers who can't be in person see it too. And then also want to thank Monica. She was the one who chose this subject when I heard that it was going to be nitric oxide, because they allow us to pick one if we want to pick one. I was kind of on the fence. I didn't know what I really wanted to do, and she had one, and I was like, oh, like, what do we, no offense. I mean, that's one of my bosses, but I was like, what am I going to do with that, I knew the traditional side of things from nitric oxide. So traditional medicine has sublingual tablets for people who are potentially have had a previous heart attack or at risk, high risk for a heart attack. So they feel chest pains and heart attacks coming on or something along those lines. They put one under their tongue for 5, and then 5 minutes later they put another one on their tongue. And then I think 5 minutes after that, if they still haven't had those symptoms resolved, then they call 911 immediately. But that's what it's used for traditionally. And then there's kind of the entertainment side of things for male libido. It's been known to help with that too. So those are kind of the two main things you see in traditional medicine. But as I researched nitric oxide more, I was blown away. And I mean, this is quite the understatement. 1992 Molecule of the Year. I mean, the people. Well, I'll get into it. Let's begin. All right. So my name is Dane Newville, PharmD, registered, licensed pharmacist in the state of Wisconsin, of course. Graduated from Concordia University out in Mequon. Okay, so not too far from here. Some of the slides are going to have excerpts from studies, so some of the reading might be a little small, so you can absolutely follow along and read it for yourself on there. I think that was wonderful from Dan. Medical disclaimer, again, I'm a licensed pharmacist. I'm not a licensed physician, so if you're going to change, stop, start any supplements or prescriptions, you should consult with your physician. This is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure anything, but just in educational purposes only, okay? So talk to your physician. There's my medical disclaimer. Overview. What are we going to talk about with nitric oxide? The history is going to be very brief. Sorry. I put a little big part there because the signaling role is going to be the big part. And I think whether you guys, the fact that you showed up, in my opinion, again, a lot of this can be partly my opinion, is whether you can articulate it or not, you have an intuitive understanding to some degree of what integrative medicine is, okay? It's slightly different than traditional medicine. Integrative medicine essentially is taking one entity and the dynamics of the entity, but in context of the whole thing. So external influences, and how does that influence the dynamics of that single thing? That's integrative medicine. We're going to drive that home a little bit. That's part of my little rabbit hole in this nitric oxide seminar, just to make sure we're educated on, what that is and what value that has. Okay, so big part there. And then, cognitive function, gastric motility, immune function, increased blood flow, which kind of goes hand in hand with lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol. I have an interesting study for you there. A lot of this has so much evidence behind it, and I know you're all smart people and ambitious, so like maybe after this you might see something that I didn't touch on enough. You'll probably go home and want to Google a little bit. Who doesn't want to Google dabble? So I'm going to combat a little bit of that, okay? And then also encourage it. So I'm going to teach you hopefully a little bit of how to have an integrative lens towards your Google dabbling. Because all of this has tons of data behind it for nitric oxide and more. This is down there already, but it's really the only known molecule with functionality to this degree. And these are going to be the reasons why. First of all, it's very simple. It's actually nitrogen monoxide. It's just it's oxygen and nitrogen, just two atoms, okay? There they are. That's at least what your body is going to create, okay? Your body can create this, it's called endogenously, so from within, but it's lipid soluble, another big takeaway, so it's free to go wherever it wants in your body. Your brain is very lipophilic, it likes fatty things, like sugars likes fatty things, right? This little guy is lipid soluble, he can go hang out in your brain if he wants. Hopefully you guys can see over there. If you can't, I apologize if you can't see, dear. I mean, at least you can follow along with that or watch it on YouTube or movie. Up to you guys. Freedom, yeah, freedom. So being uncharged, it can go wherever it wants. It is technically a free radical in nature, meaning it has, like, we're going to get a little science-y here, but there's valences, meaning orbits, like the moon orbits the Earth, electrons orbit atoms. To how far spaced out they are called valences. It has one lone valence electron that is going to get sucked up by something super quick. It's very unstable, okay? But it's technically uncharged, and that is partly why it can be lipid soluble and go wherever it wants. Come on, click. So I highlighted just these two terms in case you're not familiar with them. I mean, not everybody has a healthcare background, right? And the goal is to, whether you have a healthcare background or not, to educate you on being more discriminate about how you go about your health and wellness. So that was my goal for tonight, and nitric oxide. So made endogenously from L-arginine and L-citrulline. L-arginine, these are amino acids. So from within, so as long as your body has supply of L-arginine or L-citrulline, those are the building blocks to create nitric oxide. There's a pathway. It takes a few chemical reactions, but it needs one of these two to actually perform to become nitric oxide. Exogenous, so outside of your body. Essentially, it's pollutants, and that's because it's a free radical, and it rarely ever exists as like nitric oxide, that one oxygen, one nitrogen. In general, like outside of our bodies, it quickly gets a couple oxygens, right? It can be nitrogen dioxide and trioxide, and to the nth degree. So car exhaust, fire, cigarette smoke, literally any combustible material where the flame is of nitrogen source, the atmospheric oxygen is going to hit that nitrogen flame, and you're creating some level of a nitric oxide, okay? A nitric plus oxygens, which is actually not good for you. But nitric oxide is extremely important, which is so cool, in my opinion. Getting a little nerdy, a little pharmacy-y. So more on nitric oxide. Again, molecule of the year in 1992. Just the most mundane, plain name for a journal, but the journal's name is Science. But still, they were good. They named it 1992 molecule of the year. And this is what really drove it home for me when I was like thinking about being motivated to learn more and more about nitric oxide. The people who found out how much it's involved with your body won Nobel Prizes. I mean, that's how pivotal this little two-atom molecule is. But why? Okay. strap on your seatbelts. We're going to go through the weeds now, okay? We're really going to trek through the weeds. We're going to do a little pharmacology. So pharmacology is essentially studying how the body functions on a molecular level. So like physiology is like, what does your liver do, right? Pharmacology is like what enzymes within your liver are making it do that, okay? So we're going to do a little of that. It's not going to be crazy, but I think it's necessary for us to get a better idea. So signaling in your body, this is where we're going to start. That is a cell. I had to draw my own cell. Obviously, it's a bit more complex than this, but just let's imagine that's a cell, okay? Cell number one. Can be any cell in your body, literally any cell in your body, and they do this, okay? They're going to release substances into interstitial space or blood vessels. So what is interstitial space if you've never heard of that? So your skin is like a series of cells, right? But underneath the skin, then there's adipose tissue. The space between the cells from the skin to the new system, the adipose, there's space there, is interstitial space. That space from your adipose or your fat tissue to your muscle, interstitial space, and so on and so forth. Okay, it's kind of that like no man's land, but a lot of things go through there. And they're going to release substances. Any cell in your body is releasing substances indiscriminately. Okay, so they all have their design. Your skin is going to make certain substances because it's designed as skin. Your fat cells make certain substances, but they just release them out. They don't care where. They're not waiting. They're just releasing. Okay. They also have receptors on them. They have gateways that let stuff in because cell needs building blocks. All cells do. So remember that they're kind of permeable. Okay. But remember indiscriminately. That's cell number one. And I'm going to give you a better idea of this. We're going to call that substance that's released a first messenger. And I apologize, it's so small. We'll get a bigger screen eventually. But if we were talking about endocrinology, that system, these cells that are dispensing substances would be called hormones, like your estrogens, progesterone, testosterone, those types. That would be your first messenger, your cell releasing. If we're talking neurology, that'd be neurotransmitters, epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, things like that. That's what's getting excreted. Cytokines, if anybody's ever heard of those, if we're talking about the inflammatory system, that's what cytokines are, getting released. If we're talking about immunology, it would be like interleukins and things that are called that. Essentially, there's hundreds of them. They're called ligands, or some people say ligands. Tomato, tomato, up to you, in my opinion. So here we go. We release something. It gets encased. Sometimes that's another cell that sent an indiscriminate protein out that happened to latch onto this to help its half-life, actually, to get farther in the body. Okay, this is signaling. We doing okay on all that? Great. So another blob, that's also a cell. This is a receptor. Okay, so the substance is going to only get sucked into another cell by a receptor. This is where it becomes specific. These cells are letting stuff out indiscriminately, but any other cell has a certain receptor that will only let it in if it's basically they call it key and lock. It's literally a 3D conformation. It's got to be very specific. And that's why your body isn't in complete chaos, okay? Because if cells just took on whatever any other cell took on, we'd be just a blob of goop, right? But we have structure. That is because of this wonderfully, beautifully artistic receptor. So cell number two, we're going to call it an endothelial cell. So what is an endothelial cell? You know, in your car, there's like an air liner. It's an inner tube inside your car. That's what holds the tire. I'm sorry. The tire has like that inner tube. That's what you inflate. It's a thin layer. An endothelial cell in your blood vessels, it's a one cell layer thick layer. It's like an inner tube in a tire, but for your blood vessels. All your blood vessels have it, okay? So we're going to imagine cell number two is an endothelial cell that received one of those ligands, so the receptor, okay, took it on. What is that going to do? It's going to activate something in that cell, okay, or that cell is going to make a new substance. Finally, where is he going with all this? You'll see right down here, boom, nitric oxide is now activated. So my little analogy for this is, I have cats. I love cats. You're going to hear a cat analogy. Don't worry, the cat will survive, but it's going to get scary for a second. My cat scratched me like a couple days ago. I was like, perfect timing for this seminar. Unfortunately, my body was too fast. But my endothelial cell I got cut, right? So these cells release, upon oxygen, release stuff indiscriminately. A receptor saw that or caught that, right? Platelet activating factor. That cell receives something, now it's making platelet activating factors. That is why I'm still here today and I didn't bleed out over this little cut. So that's the idea behind cell signaling. Without cell signaling, we are toast. But this is where nitric oxide comes in. And thank you for bearing with this pharmacology, guys. I know you didn't sign up for that. You signed up for nitric oxide. There's our little receptor that took it on. So cell number 2 still, we'll say endothelial cell. So this is just an example of the intracellular function. Remember, when it receives it, it's either going to make something and excrete 2, or it's going to work on itself and redesign what it wants to do. So nitric oxide was woken up by whatever ligand that came around. This is just an example. Mitochondria, don't know if you guys know what that is. It's kind of the powerhouse of the cell. I use a multivitamin called Mitocore that has like mitochondrial health multivitamin, kind of cool. But basically, this decides when the cell's going to die. If this gets weak, it releases its own substance to kill the cell. It says, we're shutting it down, guys. Business is over. Or it helps the cell thrive. So it's very important. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. So you heard that from like the traditional medicine side, right? But it increases oxygen and supply to the mitochondria. Seems pretty important. Then these quotes, you'll see the references. These are literally quotes from different studies that I pulled out just to give you some evidence behind my claims. Nitric oxide may protect against mitochondria-mediated cell death by multiple mechanisms. I thought these were deep enough in the weeds. I didn't want to go into those. I mean, we're, I think, thick enough for this. Caveat here, in my opinion, and I think integrative medicine would stand by this too, but your body is always trying to fight for a state of homeostasis, a balance. It wants to balance things. So the caveat is with anything, especially like messenger molecules, there can be too little or too much, resulting in pathological events. And it's kind of redundant to say it, but I just wanted to say it. That's like saying, I mean, anything can be a poison, right? If you drink too much water, people have died from that, right? People have died from that. So too little or too much of anything can be bad. But that's my little caveat for you. These are our references. So your takeaway from this slide, okay, is that cell number 2 received something, it activated, it woke up the nitric oxide pathway to make nitric oxide so it could help the mitochondria so this cell could survive a little bit longer or function better, okay? That's what nitric oxide was doing in this cell. It happens to be an endothelial, could be pretty much any cell. Every cell has mitochondria, most, I should say. Cell number 2, those second messengers, primarily when they hit the cell and get sucked in, they're going to activate just intercellular functions, like my last example. That was inside the cell. That's all I was doing, was helping the mitochondria, okay? Nitric oxide, which is super cool. This is why it's considered like one of the master signaling cells, okay? Or signaling molecules. It can leave that cell. It can do intercellular work and diffuse out of the cell. It doesn't need a gateway. It can diffuse right through. So it's popping out and hitting cell number 3 now, because cell number 3 has a receptor. So it did work here, help the mitochondria. You know, more of it's getting made. Now it's getting pushed out to cell number 3. And these are the downstream effects. Finally, we're getting to what you probably came for nitric oxide. You get your vasodilation, lowering that blood pressure. You get I spelled that wrong. I apologize. It should be atherosclerosis regression. Glutamatergic expression. We'll talk about that. Smooth muscle relaxation, anti-infection signaling. I mean, it's crazy how much nitric oxide modulates or helps the body. Again, anything to the extreme can be a poison. So that's my caveat, circling back to that. Not mediated like hormones or transmitters, not regulated by storage or targeted degradation. I do want to tell you that if any of you know what a half-life is, it's how long it takes something to degrade into half. That's what it is, like how much time. Super quick half-life, 4 to 6 seconds, I think it is. So it's created and it's gone within seconds, but it can get created on the spot as long as there is the L-arginine or L-citrulline, and then it has the pathway. And you know how you get the pathway? From your genes. You know where your genes are in your DNA. So your cell can start overexpressing purposely this pathway to get more. Isn't that crazy? So cognitive function, you saw that in my overview. I didn't write this as cognitive function, but you guys are smart. So if you see nitric oxide on neurotransmitters, you can probably think we're in the cognitive space. Physical properties, limited storage. That's actually a plus. So there's only so much room up in your brain for chemicals. Again, like I said, genes can express the pathways. If the building blocks are somewhat around, it can come out almost like spontaneously, right? So it's synthesized on demand. Again, you saw that from before, can diffuse from nerve terminals. So we'd say that nerve is cell number 2, let's say. It can diffuse to cell number 3, right? We showed you that, right? Acts as both neurotransmitters and neuromodulators. I'll explain what that kind of is here. Well, I won't explain what it kind of is. I'll explain what it is. Here's a little, and you'll have that on your slides, which is nice. And I give you your references too if you want to pull them up. It's a lot of verbiage. I'll break it down, but this is what you're going to be coming across when you go and you dive into like PubMed and you look at like health literature. This is the verbiage you're coming across. Implies that structures in the vicinity of the producing cell, both neuronal and non-neuronal, are influenced following its release. It's saying nitric oxide influences everything around it and the things, you know, anything that's by it's getting influenced, right? We just talked cell number 2, cell number 3. Here we go. So we have a neuron. And then with neurons, you may or may not know, but they have synapses. That's a gap. This is a gap. And when it sends things across that gap, that's when you kind of get a neuronal firing, you know, and that's how your brain functions. So we have central nervous system axon. That's just part of like a nerve complex. But what we're looking at here, and it's kind of small, I apologize, I'll show more. But these little circles are glutamate or a glutamic acid, or I should say glutamate, I'm sorry. But we'll move to this. Calcium activates the nitric oxide synthase pathway in a nerve. So we have calcium going down. This would be the nitric oxide synthase. So L-arginine, L-citrinine should be right here too. These are building blocks. Calcium kicks that on, creates nitric oxide. But what does nitric oxide do? It's doing stuff in the cell, can help the mitochondria of that nerve. It's going to diffuse out actually and help release glutamate, right? What are the implications behind that, right? That's the real question. And I have a question mark. This is going to be, we're in the weeds. We're going to go in the Amazon in a second. It's implied for neurodegenerative dementias, brain fog, memory recall. Little side note on that. Remember, our bodies are looking for homeostasis. Glutamate and GABA aminobutyric acid. It's called GABA. These two are yin and yang, okay? We sell a product for people who want to sleep. GABA has a very calming effect, okay? That's the point of it. Traditional medicine, Lyrica gabapentin, those help with neuropathy and calming your nerves. So it calms you, it sedates you. Glutamate kind of goes the other way. It's going to make you a little more like you drank too much coffee. But believe it or not, that's awesome for your memory recall. One of the side effects of like gabapentin and Lyrica is that like you can have memory recall issues, brain fog. And that's because your GABA is outweighing in your homeostasis, your balance, the glutamate. So we want to bring that back. The side effects though of glutamate, if you have too much of it, rapid heart rate, right? Irritability, you could have like almost feel like you have like neuronal shocks, right? You don't want those side effects, but your brain's going to be working lickety split. The cool thing about, this is where nitric oxide is so impressive. And I haven't reached it yet, but we talked about vasodilation and blood pressure and everything, and that it can be created anywhere in the body. So nitric oxide is coming out to release glutamate, which is going to help with memory recall and brain fog. But cardiovascular wise, your body's going to recognize, hope I didn't make a sound there, that your heart rate might be a little faster, your blood pressure is raising. Guess what nitric oxide can do? Vasodilation from that endothelium. So you're getting the benefits of the glutamate with the memory recall and brain fog without the side effects, because nitric oxide is taking care of the vasodilation to keep you kind of chill, right? That's pretty cool. So something to note. So So we're going to move on to this Alzheimer's with the question mark, and then we're going to talk about, oh, I finally, sorry. So here, calcium comes down to the synthase. And when you hear ACE, A-S-E on the end of words, ACE synthase, that ACE part is an enzymatic reaction. That's what the ACE part is. So there's a few things going on, but it makes the nitric oxide. This is just a snippet from this right here. Glutamatergic synapses in the CNS responsible for fast excitatory neurotransmission that helps your brain fog, executive functions, memory recall, play a critical role in broad range of cognitive functions. So they're basically saying having more of these is creating this benefit, right? So that's where I'm taking you with that, okay? But still, that hasn't addressed like Alzheimer's. Again, kind of showing the pathway. I thought it'd just be redundant. I leave the references up. They don't matter to me right now, but I'll fill it in here. So takeaway from this is read studies with discretion. So if you went home, I'm going to tell you about how nitric oxide can potentially be helpful for Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases in the brain. You're going to go home, you're going to Google this, and or go on PubMed or wherever you're going to go. You're going to find literature, but a lot of times whatever's most read or most popular or replied on the most will pop up the quickest. You're going to find a lot of information that's actually going to say something along these lines. So this is where we're going to go together, because ready? It says an increasing body of evidence suggests that nitric oxide pathways are implicated in a number of neurological disorders, including Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative dementias. An increasing body. So we're finding more. They're trying to sway you. We're finding more evidence that suggests that these pathways are implicated. What are you implying? Are you implying that more nitric oxide means a worse outcome, right? So read with discretion, because you would read that and say, well, Dane, the pharmacist, was wrong. I'm seeing like 8 studies on this. I'm going to take this. That's cool. Let's talk about it. Another study. This is a lot of verbiage, but long story short, it's just saying that that expression of the pathway to produce more nitric oxide can help with hypoperfusion. So if you have too little of it, you're going to get hypoperfusion due to impaired vasodilation. You're going to get diminished capacity to remove waste products. What is like Lewy bodies in the brain? It's essentially waste, and then eventually turns into a certain like prion, and it's gunking up your head. So you definitely want to remove waste products, right? So this one directly conflicts with this one. So I'll keep that one study up, the one that implies the nitric oxide pathways in neurological disorders. So if they did a cadaver study on a brain, let's say, right, and this person had severe dementia or severe Alzheimer's, something along those lines, when they look deeper, they go, oh my God, there's so many expressed nitric oxide pathways. Maybe nitric oxide at a high amount is what did this. Okay, that's where they're kind of coming up with that. Then there's another study I pulled out here that's combating it, just like the last slide. Nitric oxide works as a retrograde neurotransmitter in synapses, allows blood flow, has an important role in intracellular signaling, regulation of neuronal metabolic status. So it's saying like good, nitric oxide good, nitric oxide bad for the brain. So we're continuing with this. Growing evidence, again, theorizing nitric oxide to be degenerative. That first study, again, saying that those pathways were very overabundant, and that in the degenerative neurons and weak dying neurons or unhealthy neurons, implying NO toxicity to be culprit, right? I mean, that's what you can take. You can read the study. Various other evidence supported it as a survival signal for cells. Not a pop quiz, you don't have to answer, and I'll answer questions at the end. But if we circle all the way back to what I was saying, nitric oxide was doing from an intracellular level. Remember when it was with the mitochondria, helping it survive, and mitochondria is helping the cell go, right? That's survival. You ready? My wife advised against this analogy. Disclaimer: the fictional cat survives. Okay. So I have 2 cats. Whether you're a pet lover or not, you can at least follow along with this. Say you have a cat and you went on vacation. Somehow, when you were packing your clothes, little guy went in there and you were rude and didn't want to say goodbye, so you didn't look for the cat. This cat's stuck in your dresser drawer, okay? And you're gone for, let's say, a week. It cannot get out. Yeah, don't worry. Fictional. We're going to get through this. My wife was against it. We're going to get through this. I promise. 2 days go by, 3 days go by. This thing doesn't have water. What do you think it's doing? It is tearing up the clothes. It is tearing up the roof of the walls. It is tearing up the drawers. It is biting the wood. It is doing everything it can to what? To survive, right? Don't worry. You get home. You realize you didn't remember saying goodbye. You took a flight back home. You're looking everywhere. You open the, this is how much you love that cat. Yeah. You open the drawer. The poor little guy or gal is passed out unconscious, right? Right. Scratches everywhere. Now follow me on this. That first body of evidence would say those scratches and claw marks have been found with multiple cases of cats in drawers. So overuse of claws and teeth are the reason this cat is degenerative or weak or not surviving. That's how they take that. Do you see where I'm going with that? Overabundance of the expression of that pathway, overuse of claws and teeth, that would be the first study. Those other studies are saying those pathways were tools for that thing to survive, and it was overexpressing them because it was trying to survive in a hard circumstance. The first body of evidence, in my opinion, you can take it how you want. The first body of evidence is taking it not in the full context. Integrative medicine is full context. So how are we seeing this? We know physiologically nitric oxide to be a survival piece for cells on a cellular level, intercellular, right? So I would take that, and you can take it all you want. I would take that as a neuron's dying, it is trying to do everything it can to maintain its function. That includes overexpressing pathways to create blood flow to keep it alive. Not that the nitric oxide expression is what's killing it. So that cat analogy, hopefully that made sense to you guys. Someone would say teeth and nails, scratches, scratching too much teeth expression, that leads to a bad cat. It's the total opposite, right? It's using the tools it has to survive. The cat, you were able to nurse it, woke up, hair got fluffy, loves you, headbutt, slays on your lap, watch TV, happy ending, okay? Good, right. So my wife, okay, if she watches it, she'll be like, wow, I can't believe you did that. She kept saying, no. And then like a simple another one would be like, if you had a bum leg, you're going to get stronger muscles in your right side or whatever, or your arms if you have crutches. If someone didn't know your species very well and didn't understand it completely, because we don't understand everything completely, they might say overexpression of muscles in your arms and that opposite leg is degenerative. That could be the cause, but it's the complete opposite, trying to survive. I think the cat one works a lot more specifically. And I had no other way to do it. So I like alliteration. Discern, okay? Discriminate. So we want to separate, and then we want to make sure we understand the separation, like find, differentiate, okay? And decipher, understand. Do this in context. When you're looking at literature, get the full context. Use that integrative lens. So that was a way of discerning with integrative medicine in your mind. I wanted to share that. Wow, good job, everyone. We're out of the weeds. Now we're going to go back to the generic, like, what does nitric oxide do? How great is it? So I just had to put that there because you guys you're troopers if you want to deal with pharmacology and then analyzing studies. You came just to see what nitric oxide is about. So nitric oxide on blood pressure. There's going to be far less references here because hopefully you can, at this point, take my word for this. If you don't, Google it. Go ahead. Use that discernment. You'll see. Vasodilation. Relaxes smooth muscles. That's what's going to lower your blood pressure. That's what helps with blood pressure control. That's what prevents those heart attacks, the sublingual ones, like I wrote there. Improving blood flow when you're opening up the pipes. Can help with the erectile dysfunction. Again, that's what? If you have more blood flow and more dilation, that's exactly what that unit is, right? Numerous bodies of evidence for this. I did not put a reference. Please do your own homework on that one. Go ahead. It'll take you 2 seconds. This was kind of like, I think, very logical, right? So nitric oxide and endurance, like physical activity. We had someone come in, going to remain anonymous. She was like an endurance runner. She was going to take a trip to Colorado, which is at altitude. She wanted to know if she should take a supplement for nitric oxide because she can do a lot of hiking. And well, we know that nitric oxide improves blood flow, and then what does blood carry? Oxygen. So you're going to improve oxygenation. When you go at elevation, you're limiting that immediately. So it was like, yeah, that was kind of a no-brainer. And we're not giving you straight nitric oxide. I offered her a supplement which gives you those building blocks. So if your body, one cell is like, I'm not getting as much oxygen as normal, expresses the pathways, guess what? Those building blocks are there. It can have its moment. So it's a perfect setup for that. But improved blood flow, improved oxygenation. Improved oxygenation improves physical endurance. I mean, that is, I told you, it's going to be boring. The crescendo was really early on. I tried to drive it home, as you can tell. So you just rest easy now. You don't even have to pay attention if you don't want to at this point. It was, I had the big moment with the cat. This is a systematic review. And so I talked about this in my vitamin D seminar. If any of you watched it, I kind of hit home on studies and what those are. But if a meta-analysis is like taking in all other studies, like it's actually taking in the context of studies, has shown that arginine, so L-arginine supplementation, could have positive effects on anaerobic and aerobic performance. You can look that up. I mean, the evidence is out there. So this one's kind of fun. So I gave you one more kind of fun one. Nitric oxide and cholesterol. From the Journal of Biological Chemistry. Like microbiology and microbiologists are a crazy bunch of people. Love them to death. I had one as a professor once, but what they did, some microbiologists, some scientists, they took some mice, these mice are okay, and they had them overexpress the human nitric oxide pathway. So they were able to change their genes to overexpress this pathway. What did that do, right? That elevation decreased their blood pressure by 20 units of mercury, just boom. Their plasma levels of cholesterol reduced by 17%. Those are both extremely impressive. I thought this was phenomenally impressive because atherosclerotic lesions, plaque in your arteries, that's kind of tough to pull out. Like K2 helps pull that out. Some other things help pull. But that's once it's in there, I mean, it's tough to get out of there, especially by 40%. Nitric oxide, just our pathways put on little mice, just overexpressing, pulled that much plaque out of their arteries. That is unreal, in my opinion. I haven't seen evidence of pulling plaque out to that degree in anything yet. So we conclude, so it's funny, they're super humble. We conclude that an increase of that pathway is beneficial and provides protection. Like, way to be humble, I love it. Nitric oxide and immune function. This could have been its own seminar. What you can take from this is literally every cell in the immune system, macrophages and mast cells, neutrophils, the T lymphocytes, natural killer cells, they're all influenced to some degree by nitric oxide. It's more of a modulator, meaning it's not just providing pure benefit. It does have some backlash where it will kill some of them off. But more or less, again, we're thinking about our body as a homeostasis. It's fighting for some level of homeostasis. I'll touch on that too when I talk about the inflammatory piece in the next one of the next slides. But another thing I want to talk about here, macrophages. So there is bacteria where you can get an infection called gram-negative bacteria. That is like the feared bacterial infection of hospitals. When I was doing hospital rotations, people go, I hate to say it, people go quick with gram-negative because it releases something like LPS, lipopolysaccharide, but it's something that can just overload your body. And gram-negative bacteria, when you get that infection, they hit that hard, they hit that quick. I mean, you can go from feeling fine to, I mean, ICU in 2 days with that. So it's nothing to screw with. Pseudomonas is one of them. One of the reasons they can pull that off is from that LPS release. Nitric oxide has been shown actually to help macrophages combat against it. It helps them release something that beats down that LPS, so macrophages are designed to just engulf whatever, like it sees something bad, it just engulfs it and then destroys it from within.
Is that called C. difficile?
I don't know if that one's gram-negative. I'd have to look that up. I apologize. I got to brush up on my anti-infectives, but I can definitely find out for you, dear. But that was one of the things that nitric oxide did in a very positive light for the immune system. So nitric oxide and inflammation, it enhances anti-inflammatory medications effects like your ibuprofen, for instance, or your naproxen, and limits their side effect profiles, and that's primarily from one of the next slides I'll show you because it helps protect your mucosal lining and such, and that can often be an issue with those types of medications, ulcers, things like that. It downregulates immune cells that are pro-inflammatory. I mean, that could be probably on the immune cell slide too, because with the immune system, there's also inflammation. Wherever your immune system is going, usually inflammation is going too, because they kind of like go hand in hand as far as inflammation will build up the space to get more stuff in. The more fluid you can get around there, the more traffic can get in and out. And that's what they're trying to do. It's like an ambulance driving down the road, right? They're just trying to get there. So the key though, because it has some pro-inflammatory pieces, nitric oxide, is that it's a modulator, and inflammation can be good or bad, right? There is bad inflammation we're trying to get rid of, but there is essential inflammation that can save your life, okay? Something to think about. So nitric oxide in the gastrointestinal tract, good old black and white slide here. Who doesn't love one of those? We have an NSAID, ibuprofen. You just popped, the serving says take 1 to 2 every 6 to 8 hours or something, but you're like, no, my doctor has prescribed me 800 milligrams 10 years ago. I'm popping 4 now. Boom. And you're like, I don't have time to take a snack because I'm about to go to work. All I have is coffee, so this is going down on an empty stomach. I don't care. Wham, you do it. So what is that going to do? Potentially mucosal injury, okay? So it's going to essentially shut down things that help your mucosal lining, so that'll be exposed. Plus, like something like ibuprofen actually will stick to the lining and just sear down in there. It doesn't, it'll sit where it is and just kind of try to lower. So that'll lead to mucosal injury, right? But nitric oxide, so one of the things it does is reduce blood flow, right, to that area, and neutrophil adherence goes down. So nitric oxide helps bring blood flow up, right? So that'll help the mucosal lining. It helps neutrophil adherence, which helps the mucosal lining. So essentially, like going back to that one slide, NSAIDs, we're limiting their side effect profile by using nitric oxide or having optimal levels. Who here had an optimal level? I know there's a couple. Raise those hands. We're popping ibuprofen tonight, nothing in our stomachs. Just kidding. We're not doing that. But you'd be less likely out of all of us to probably get an ulcer, barring other things, right? Of course. Repairing induced damage, maintaining gastric mucosal integrity. I said all these things, improved blood flow. This is another thing. I mean, that I said on the overview, gastric motility, improved blood flow is going to improve motility in general. So that just kind of goes hand in hand. I want to recap. I think we've gone through a lot. I feel like I've just been rambling, but hopefully some of this stuff stuck. And then you got the overviews too to like reflect on it. L-arginine, big takeaways. L-arginine, L-citrulline, those are your building blocks. Without those, we're really not going to be able to pull to make nitric oxide happen. We need the pathways. Our genes will express the pathways, but still, and like in your neurons, calcium had to enter the cell, but that's always abundant. You're not really going to be that calcium depleted, so we shouldn't have to worry. But we're going to need L-arginine and L-citrulline. The body makes it on command if the building blocks are available. I love, the body's looking for homeostasis. Like I said, the glutamate and the GABA, right? Calming and irritable. Your body's always trying to like keep those in center. Alcoholics, for instance, are when you drink alcohol and say you're a hard alcoholic, you're pushing your GABA so far to the one end that your body's trying to get homeostasis and will overcreate glutamate. So, but you don't feel it because you push that GABA so hard. So when they stop drinking alcohol, all of a sudden that GABA flux is gone. All of that glutamate comes in and it just huge flies to the other end, and that's why it can potentially kill them. That's why they get that irritability, hallucinations. They have way too much glutamate. It just washes to the other side. It's a little example of your body in homeostasis, okay? So that's what that's for. But hopefully you took away that nitric oxide is like way more involved. I barely touched on the traditional medicine side of things for that, right? We talked about way more about nitric oxide, literally cell to cell, signaling, intercellular activation, all of the survival benefits it has, right? And I want you to take away, use stuff in context, integrative medicine. I just made this up, but I thought it was cool. I think it makes sense. Discern, discriminate, decipher, which, is to kind of come to some understanding within context of everything. Okay. Supplementing. I have a picture here. It's just a brand we carry, and I like the brand because they do evidence-based studies, which you don't see often with supplement companies. And as you've seen from my slides, I like my little bit of evidence, right? So L-citrulline again. This is what it has in it. We sell it like literally right there. L-citrulline, okay. It has quercetin, which is kind of interesting, but it improves your endothelial cell dysfunction. So it's helping with inflammation. So it's kind of geared, this one is kind of geared more towards like blood pressure and cardiovascular health. Okay, but we saw that nitric oxide can help pull some plaque out, so help lower that cholesterol, can help with blood pressure. So why not have something that's going to help the endothelial cell, which is where the nitric oxide is working on? That makes total sense. They're smart like that. I give them credit. They have a trademark. So when you see these trademarks, essentially that's when they did studies on something. So they trademark it. So they did a study on this. And this little combination of grapeseed extract, they found after 4 weeks of supplementing, the participants were able to maintain healthy blood pressure, just healthy blood. Apologize. And healthy blood. Okay, again, with supplements, they cannot say they're curing or treating anything. They can only help. So remember that. But we've seen evidence now of how far it really helps, right? Testing, I know some of you didn't get to test, I apologize, but it's really cheap. It's the same idea. You just saliva on the finger, test it. You have colors, and it's going to tell you if you're depleted, low, or optimal. Usually a saliva test. Supplementing with L-arginine and L-citrulline allows your body to control that homeostasis again. So it's very safe. It's really hard to kind of overdose on L-arginine or L-citrulline. I'm not saying slam a whole bottle, but be sensible. Don't be paranoid. Don't be paranoid about it. Because again, it's just a building block. Your body's only going to use it when it thinks it needs it. So putting more building blocks around isn't going to be the worst idea in the world. But again, talk to your physician. I'm not a physician. I'm a pharmacist. I can help with other things. I can't help diagnose, cure, anything like that. Okay? Hopefully this was very helpful to you. I have no idea how long or short this has been. Thank you for your time.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys. Are there questions? I can try to field questions. If not, that's cool too. Cat survived. You guys recall?
So,
Thanks, everyone.
so for low, the tester, should we just start taking the
The L-arginine?
L-arginine?
You certainly can. Yeah.
Start with that first or take that with the nitric oxide?
So you would want to supplement your nitric oxide with, so you're not going to buy nitric oxide. You shouldn't. Okay. Remember, like outside of your body, it's kind of a flute. It's just, it's like sucking on a car muffler. That's not a good idea. But you can supplement with L-arginine. Okay, that was an amino acid. It should be on there. And L-citrulline. Those two will help your body when it needs to build up that nitric oxide for you. So that's the kind of the safe route. Okay. And I should have said briefly to help you with that. You don't want to buy a supplement right away. Like watermelon, for instance, has a ton of L-citrulline in it. And L-citrulline is neuroprotective. Legumes, certain types of nuts, I believe. A quick Google can find you all the foods it's in, but it's actually in more foods than you think. But watermelon is a big one. L-citrulline is abundant in that. But you had a question, dear?
So much is flying through my mind.
I apologize. Well, that's what we're here for. I tried to just drill it in.
So I had read that your nasal passages can produce nitric oxide.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I didn't touch on that either. I mean, that's the thing. Nitric oxide has so much to it. If you breathe through your nose, that has certain pathways in the sinuses that are automatically activated to dispense nitric oxide in your body. It's going to help dilate your lungs a little bit, and that's going to actually help your blood pressure. So you're exactly right. I didn't touch on that. It's like if you want a little burst of nitric oxide, all you have to do is breathe through your nose.
So what's the role of exercise in all of this? Or is there a role?
To elevate nitric oxide.
Or do we know?
Yeah, so nitric oxide helps improve blood flow. So when you exercise, what you're doing is you're providing resistance against your body. Your body's going to respond by trying to overcome resistance. And if it notices that resistance is, we need more muscles to fire, well, we need more blood flow to get the chemicals to those muscles to get them to fire. And how do we get more blood flow? We gotta release some nitric oxide to get your blood vessels wider to get that there quick. That's kind of how that would work. So that's where exercise is going to pull from your L-arginine, L-citrulline.
Okay.
There's pre-workout supplements even dedicated that have tons of that in it to kind of get you prepared. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can do to naturally produce
Raise it.
Raise it.
The nose
Outside
breathing
of
was,
that.
ooh, I hit that, that's gonna be loud. The nose breathing is big. And then otherwise, just trying to find it in your foods. The exercise is going to force your body to pull out more of it. And I think that has some downstream effects too. And you're probably gonna take deeper breaths. You're gonna breathe through your nose unless it's clogged. But outside of that, I'm not aware of any others. There might be, but I didn't research or come across any. Yeah. Any other questions? Hopefully that answered you fair enough.
What is the effect of aging on nitric oxide?
Oh, that's a really good question.
What was it? Next week.
You have the presentation next week.
Yeah.
What's the question?
What was the effect? What's the effect of aging on nitric oxide? Like vice versa. Can nitric oxide and having high levels of it reduce potential for aging?
No,
Or vice versa.
Right.
Okay, well, I'll touch the former first. I don't have a ton of information on it, but if we think about this to some level in context, that slide that had nitric oxide helping the mitochondria of the cell, right, to perform and function better. The healthier your cells are, they do proliferate, they do purposely die off, they need to, but I imagine the healthier cell integrity, the less aging has an impact on you. So nitric oxide plays a role in healthy cell function at every skin, muscle, every cell, right? So I would conclude, and I could be off, you can Google, or check it out, but I would conclude from that ideology and that logic,
Sure.
nitric oxide slows aging down
Your
comparatively.
cells would be healthier.
Yeah, if you had the same exact person, one was depleted in nitric oxide, one was optimal, this one will look far younger downstream than this one will, and probably have better endurance and better cognitive function. We hit that too, better digestive tract. So, and then does aging affect nitric oxide? Yes, certainly. Reduce blood flow and everything. It's going to make it harder for like L-arginine, L-citrulline to even get to the places where your body wants nitric oxide to be, right? So it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. If you have reduced blood flow, you're less likely to get building blocks there, and those building blocks are the things that are going to help your blood flow come, right? So I imagine it impacts nitric oxide a little bit, but you can supplement.
Well, I just thought that when you finish your career as a pharmacist, you can go on stage and be a comic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Or if you get fired by him.
Well, I hope not. I mean, well, we'll see. I'll let you guys know, I suppose. You never know how it went, until I got to go post, and watch it afterwards. So, yeah, I'm glad you all had a chuckle, and hopefully you got educated too. But you're free to go about, do your thing. And I don't know how to shut this off, otherwise I would have. I don't want to keep them hanging. But I sincerely, we as a pharmacy appreciate all of you coming. It's just a different ideology.
No, it's good.
Integrative medicine is a different animal, and it's cool to see people embracing it. I didn't even know about it until, I got interviewed here and they asked me some questions and I thought, these are kind of out of the box questions. This is really neat, and I think I did a good job and they hired me on and it was just like a whole new world. And I was like, oh my God. But then all my schooling is like, what do I do with all that? I got, as you could tell, some level of like how to discern and how to navigate my way through things. And I took that piece. But like all of the
You're staying stretched.
yeah, the little bit of plasticity there, we're trying to maximize. So,
Great.
thank you all.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very good.